need to appoint an inspector of elections and a nominating committee. What the nominating committee does is they look for new board members or reaffirm the existing board members. So we have them already for 2021. So this would be for 2022. The candidate for inspector of elections who counts the ballots is Bill Erland, who I don't see him here tonight, but he has agreed to serve. For the nominating committee, we have 3 people, George Chason, Sid Keels, and Kalis Ward, all of whom are here tonight. So at this time, if I can have a motion from someone other than those 3 members to move those nominations for a vote.
So moved.
Okay.
Seconded.
Second. Okay. So everyone doesn't necessarily know where the raised hand is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you, please turn your video on if you have it off. And I'm just going to see by raised hand all in favor. So if you're in favor, raise your hands, please. Okay, this is not working, but whatever. Okay. Opposed, same sign. Okay. Motion passes. Motion passes. So we've taken, basically combined 2 actions into one. That is really the only, oh, okay. That's the only business we have to do.
So what do you think of the statement we got out of Michigan, right? Where they say these are simple truths, right? The people who win the elections.
Okay, I'm going to mute everybody again.
Very.
Okay. Somebody's not turning their TV off and we can't have that. Okay, there were some other questions.
BMT book.
BMT book, you can comment on that?
Yes, as far as the BMT book is concerned, and Sandy, you can correct me if you wish. We're just about finished with all of the proofreading sections. It's only a matter of a couple of weeks, and then we'll start seeking a printer. So I'm hopeful that the first edition will be out by the first quarter of 2021. Everyone who's currently a member is entitled to that and will also be entitled to the second edition as part of their membership. It's going to be quite a book. Can you unmute Sandy if he has anything else to say?
Sandy, where is he? Sandy, unmute yourself if you have anything more to say.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we have we sent it to 3 different people for to review it, and then once we get their final corrections, should be ready to go to the printer. And depending on how long the corrections take, which hopefully won't take that long, it's all basically designed and almost ready to go. It's just a matter of proofreading, you know, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and it should be ready.
Okay.
Now to Carl Jackson about the Transit Museum, using it for monthly meetings, we've thought about that. And when we start our search, when things do calm down and they open up again, we would certainly want to talk to them. They do have a meeting room in the mock-up of a subway car. I think it might seat 50, so it might be a little tight. But
yeah.
the problem there is it would require us paying for them to stay open until 10 p.m. on one Friday night a month. And we're not sure if they'd even be interested or whether the cost would be prohibitive, but it's something we have thought about.
Right. And actually, since the subject came up, maybe I'll do a little straw poll. We'll do it with a show of hands again. And again, those of you who don't turn your video on, I can't see you, so I won't be able to get your view of it. Okay, So we have two choices. One is a hotel in the Penn Station area. Show of hands of interest in the Penn Station area. Raise your hands. Raise them good and high so I can see. If you're interested in a hotel in the Penn Station area. Okay, I just don't want to show. Okay, the same question now. Who of you are interested in meetings at the Transit Museum if we can get it? Show of hands. Looks like there's no interest in.
More interested in Penn Station, which makes sense because it's more of a central hub.
Right. I mean, we will look at all the options, and part of it, a lot of it's going to be how much they want, and if we can get Wi-Fi and those sort of things. Okay. Erwin Davis, did you want to say something, or you just wanted to make sure you got counted? All right. Very good. So if there are no other questions for the business meeting, we are going to we're going to move to tonight's meeting. Before I describe tonight's program and speaker, Sandy reminded me that
one more question, and that was December and January.
that's what I'm getting to.
Okay.
Okay. The December program is going to be given by our program chairman, Andrew Grawl, and he is going to be doing a tour of North America with some surprises and some historical pictures. Andrew always puts on an outstanding program. January, at this moment, is going to be scheduled by Jack May. We don't know what the program for him is going to be. So unlike some of the other groups, we usually publicize the actual program maybe 1, maximum 2 months ahead, and particularly during this fluid time, that's the way we have to do it. So, all right. So I'm going to introduce our speaker. Once we start, then I am going to ask you all to turn your video off so that there's no interruption for the speaker. If you have questions for the speaker, put them in the chat. I will ask the speaker at appropriate points. When there's a pause, I will ask the question. It won't be instantaneously, but we will try to get to all of your questions. All right. Tonight's speaker is Mark Kavanagh. He's going to share photos from his many travels to Japan over the last 30 years. He has seen a lot of things over the years and is pleased to share them with ERA members and guests from around the world. A focus of his program tonight is Tokyo. The city is full of many different rail operations with many forms of traction, subways, high-frequency commuter service, long-distance and high-speed trains. On top of it, there are monorails, trams, and rubber-tired trains. In addition to Tokyo, some of the smaller Japanese city tram systems will also be featured. Mark
we are muted.
Mark grew
No,
up.
we're still on here.
Mark grew up in
I'm trying. I did it.
Mark grew up in Brooklyn near the elevated Culver line. He transferred to Oregon in 1980, where he's lived ever since. His job has afforded him travel all around the world, fueling his passion for rail systems. He has a website, if you're interested, www.ktransit.com, features photos and transit systems from around the world. I will put that in the chat once we start. Okay, so at this time, if I can ask you all to turn your video off, and if you don't, I will turn it off once the program starts. Mark, are you ready to go?
Yep, I'm ready to go.
All right, wait. Okay, so so you can go ahead and, yes,
So you should see my screen now, I think.
yes, we can. It's great. Okay, go ahead.
Perfect. All righty, so I like having the chat window on another screen. All right, so thank Bob for the intro. So yep, my name is Mark Kavanagh. I currently live in Oregon, but next month is my 30th anniversary of my first trip to Japan. So it was kind of fun that way. So Bob kind of went through this, but a little bit more about from Brooklyn. I grew up by the subway avenue. Was my stop on the Culver line. I went to high school in Nyack, New York on Hudson River, got my first train set when I was 5 years old. Then I moved to Oregon in 1990. I work in the semiconductor industry, so Intel's my customer. I've been all over the world. And then I'm also a board member for the Trolley Museum, the Oregon Electric Railway Historical Society. Our trolley museum is located at Parallel Heritage Park in Brooks, Oregon. And I'm also a choir member and travel coordinator for St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Salem. I actually use the same travel agent as the ERA did for our trip to England that we did 2 years ago, which was a fun thing. They also know me as transit guide, so because if we go on the choir trip, we will ride trains to get to wherever we need to go. That's just the way it is. And then another hobby of mine is just geocaching. And these pictures here, so this is a picture of me at the museum, the lower picture in front of our Sydney car number 1187. And then this is me inside a Tokyo tram on the Arakawa line. This would have been 1996, 97. And the operator was on his break because this was at the end of the line. And he saw me taking pictures of the controls, and then he motioned to me without any English speaking, why don't you go sit down and I'll take your picture. So that's that. So a little bit about Japan, just if anyone hasn't been there. There's the main island is Honshu, and that's where most people live. And then you got Kyushu in the south, Shikoku Island here in Sapporo on the north. Most of Japan is mountainous. So most people live on the coastline. But my first focus here is going to be mostly in the Tokyo region, which is also called the Kanto region, which is pretty much the largest flat area you'll find in Japan. That's why the Kanto plain is so populated, it's because it was easy to develop. And then you go into this mass chaos. This is the entire rail system for Tokyo region. So Narita Airport's over here, Haneda Airport, and then but you have this is pretty much every line that there is, the private lines, the subway lines, the JR lines, monorails, and all sorts of stuff. So there is no shortage of rail travel that you can do, just stayed in Tokyo. So my first part of the presentation is going to focus on the subway system, which is actually two subway systems in Tokyo. One's Tokyo Metro, and the other one is the Toei subway. The Tokyo Metro is a quasi-private company. It's owned by the city of Tokyo along with a regional government and I believe one other. And then the Toei Metro is strictly owned by the city of Tokyo. Nice thing about Tokyo Metro, on their map, they actually, currently they show all subway lines. This is the Tokyo Metro's map. But back in the late 90s, Tokyo Metro would show their map very well highlighted of their lines, and the Toei lines were very narrow lines. So it made it a little bit more difficult to figure out, where to transfer. And the transfers are there, but you have to go through fare gates for a transfer. Sometimes you go through multiple fare gates for a transfer, depending on how it goes. So now I'm going to go through all the lines of Tokyo real quick. So first I'm going to start at the Ginza line, which is the first subway line in all of Japan. It opened in 1927 between Asuka, be nice if they're Asuka, and then Ueno. Ueno is a big train terminal in Tokyo, one of the many. Then another line was built from Shibuya to Shimbashi, as well as the line coming down here was extended to Shimbashi. There was actually two separate lines going to Shimbashi. They were joined in 1931, I believe. And when they were joined, there's two old platforms that are no longer used. You can barely see them when the Ginza train goes around the corner. You can look up and you see tracks going up a hill, and there's a station up there. There's talks about making that a subway museum, but there is already another subway museum in Tokyo. So, but it'd be more like what New York Transit Museum is if they do that. So this is just some postcard views of the Ginza line when it opened. And the Ginza line is a standard gauge system with third rail. The story goes that a Japanese businessman was in London and really fell in love with the subway there. And so he said, Tokyo must open a subway. And the story also goes that he brought in some consultants from New York to help design it. So the Ginza line actually has some ideas that look like it's from New York. I mean, it's standard gauge, third rail, and such like that. So this is one of the only entrants that looks in the classic Oriental style, but this is Asuka, which is there's a famous temple just a few blocks over of the Ginza line. Now this photo is from 2010. This is the Kiyobashi station. This is a series 01 series train that was built in 1983 that replaced the series that was before that was built in the 60s, I believe. This was one of the few sections, actually this is the only section where the Ginza line went outside. It was actually elevated. This is in Shibuya. However, this view is no longer possible, and I'll have photos later because they've moved the Shibuya station from its original location, and it's actually where this viaduct is today. So this is the original Shibuya station. It's basically on the 3rd or 4th, 5th floor of a department store. This department store is down below. But this photo is from 2019, and this is one of the newer class subway cars called the 1000 Series. The 1000 Series started in 2012 going into service, and now they're the exclusive on the Ginza line. But this station this area is now closed, but this is the access to one of the two yards for the Ginza lines through this station. This is what the Shibuya station is today. This just opened late 2019. This photo is from 2020 when I was in Tokyo this year. It has a very interesting architectural feature here. And then the old station was 2 side platforms, so the train would actually pull in and then go to a siding and then turn back on the other platform. And now it's there's an island platform. The plan is that both tracks will both go through. Right now, only one track goes through to access the yards. So there's talk of the Ginza line in peak service runs every 1.5 to 3 minutes. So sometimes maybe having 2 tracks at terminals is not good, fast enough turns. So they may run through some trains back into the old turnback tracks.
Mark, there was a question about have the Tokyo Rapid Transit System preserved samples of older and original cars anywhere?
In the Tokyo Subway Museum, they have one of the original Ginza line cars and one of the original Marunuchi line cars, the full cars in there. They're also on the Marunuchi line, they have re-imported back a few cars from Buenos Aires, came back to Tokyo, and they're supposed to be refurbishing that to have some sort of historic train. As far as the previous Ginza line trains, I believe they've kept one for work service. Whether it's going to be made for future historic purposes, it's not clear to me.
Okay, and you're going to be showing us pictures of those Marunuchi line cars later, I believe, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to show examples of two classes of this 1000 series train. So this is the more typical 1000 series. You'll notice the double marker lights up here and the coloring scheme. But in their idea of trying to keep some of the heritage line of the Ginza line, they decided, well, they took two of the 1000 series trains and try to keep it in all yellow color scheme, like the original cars, and it's a single marker light or headlight up here. And then the interior of these cars are also very different. They tried to keep it a mock wood look, and also the rest of the trains, they're just stainless. Here they tried to make it look like it's copper handrails. So Japan is very interested in heritage, but they try to make the modern equipment look heritage instead of necessarily keeping their operating heritage cars. As I said, Ginza line has 2 yards. One is at Shibuya, but there is also one in Ueno, just a few blocks from Ueno Station. And it's a 2-level yard. There's the street level yard and there's one below ground. To get to access to the street level one, the trains actually have to cross a street. So that comes up from a tunnel from the main line and goes across into the yards. And there's one cross in the yard. So if you get there at the shoulder of peak hour, you get to see the trains crossing. And then you can get the view down. So in the left photo is the older cars, the 01 series, and then the transition to the new series. And here you can see side by side of the retro look versus the standard look of the 1000 series. This is Ueno Station. So Ueno Station is a little bit, for me, I tend to use it a lot when I'm in Japan, because if I take the Skyliner, I tend to transfer at Ueno Station to get to Narita Airport. So I've seen a lot of changes in Ueno. So this is before they put the platform gates on. This is pictures from 2010. This is 2013, so you can see the new equipment is coming online. This is 2013. Again, it's a curved platform. This is important to note because this is a trains coming sign, which is no longer there, but it is, and I'll show you that in a minute. And then they put the platform gates in. But it's this is better than some of the platform gates because at least they're clear. And since Ueno Zoo is pretty close, they have panda bears on the platform gates themselves. There's a better shot of that. But they've also turned Ueno Station into a kind of a historic museum station. So they have some displays, like this is a display of the old ticket chopper that they used to use with the modern fare gates on either side. And that the train arriving indicator is now on the wall on the platform. So and there's various other displays. So I highly recommend, going to Ueno Station on the Ginza line and seeing all the historic displays that they have. So now I'm going to turn over to the Marunuchi line, which is the second subway line that was built in Tokyo. It opened in 1954. Again, it's a standard gauge line, third rail. The line's 27.4 kilometers long. It's built as a C. So you can see it starts at Ikebukuro, comes into Tokyo main station, and then branches out into Okikubo and Hanacho out here.
Here are some listings for.
It's called the Marunuchi line because the Tokyo station is in the Marunuchi district of Tokyo. So sorry for the graininess of this photo, but this was from my very first trip to Japan in December 1990. This is a 300 series car, car 681, and it was built in 1961 and retired in 1993. This is the only photo I've gotten of this class car, and this is the same color scheme that the line opened with in 1954. This is one of the classic shots for the Marunuchi line. This is at Ochanomizu. It's going over the Kanda River. The station to the right is the JR line. So this is where the Chuo and Sobu lines come together. Sobu line goes across on that arch bridge over there, and the Chuo line goes towards Tokyo Station. Marunuchi line has a few spots where you can capture the train outside. It's not, most of the Tokyo subway is pretty much underground. The O2 series came into service in 1988. This is Yatsuya. I have this is pictures from 1998. This station is another great station to get photos of because it's on a slight curve. But this is before platform gates. So the platform gates really changed the way you can do things. So now the platform gates are in place, but you can still, if you reach over the partition, you can get some decent photos. This is from 2018. And you notice they on some of the, when they did restoration of some of these cars or refurbished them, they added the sinusoidal wave color scheme on the stripe, just like the original Marunuchi line colors. This is at Nakano Sakuge, and this is where there's the shuttle line branches off to go to Hanacho. It's a 3-car shuttle train, although in 2020 they're actually going to reduce the amount of shuttle trains because they're now going to add more through service on the Hanacho branch since they extended the length at the Hanacho terminal to accept the 6-car trains, because before this it could only accept 3-car trains. But that branch line is important because it's also the access to their main yard and shops for the line at Nakano.
Mark, a question from the audience is how are they about allowing or forbidding photography?
I have never had a problem. I've only had a problem once trying to take a picture of the tram in Tokyo, the Arakawa line. And it wasn't really trouble, but I was just sitting out in the park and taking pictures, and Koban, the police, walked up to me and asked to see my passport, which seemed kind of bizarre. But usually it's never a problem. You see photographers everywhere. I mean, railfan in Japan is very popular. They have lots of fun names for Japan rail fans. Tetsu Otokonoko is one of them. This is at Hanacho Terminal in 2010 before they extended the platforms to allow the longer trains. This is an interior shot, so nice, clean cars with lots of advertising, but it's not overly obnoxious. It's another good spot to captures the trains outside. So it's at Korokoen, taken from the platform, at end of the platform there. Coming out of the tunnel or going into the tunnel. This is going in. So left-hand rules are predominant in Japan. So the trains run on the left. This is at Miyogadenai. This is in 2019, another good spot to get trains. And you're seeing leads to a small yard coming off of right here. It's just another shot of Yatsuya, the storm coming in with this Tokyo skyline in the background. And this is in 2018. And this is the newest cars that just came into service. They entered service in 2019. I caught this one in January. This is at Korokoen. So notice they put the sinusoidal wave stripe up top, and that's because with the platform gates, you don't really get to enjoy you could actually see it on the platforms. And just another shot at the same station, just looking the other direction.
Mark, a question, let me see, are the lines manually operated or CBTC or any other sort of automation that we know about?
They do have CBTC on most of the lines, if not all the lines. If they have platform gates, it means they don't have conductors anymore on that line. So the Marunuchi line no longer has conductors or guards, however they want to call them. So it's one single man operation. But they do have the controls that tells you what the speed they need to be at. But they're not totally automatic. At least not all the lines. And this is at Ochanomizu. The classic shot Ochanomizu wasn't possible because the bridge is under construction, so that's best I could. But you can see the top of a JR train right here. That would be the Chuo line right there. Okay, going from the Marunuchi line, we're going to the Hibiya line. This is also owned by Tokyo Metro. So I'm doing Tokyo Metro lines first, then Toei afterwards. So this opened in 1961. It mostly parallels the Ginza line. You start at Ueno. You can see it just parallels and intertwines with the Ginza, because the Ginza line, even at 2-minute service, is packed to the gills. It still is, even with all the extra service. But the Hibiya line is a narrow gauge line. So this is a 3'6" gauge with overhead, and it's 20.3 kilometers long. And it's also a through routed line. So a lot of the Tokyo Metro lines are through routed with one of the private railways or the JR line. So this one's through with the Tokyu Toyoko line, and on the south and on the north side, it's through with the Tobu Izizaki line.
Mark, another related question is the motorman the one to press the button to sound the warning tone when there is no conductor?
A lot of platforms have platform guards, so they will press the buzzer, or they can press it from their cab, I believe now. And they also have monitors they can see either at the end of the platform that they can see end to end, but most of the stations still have platform guards despite the gates. So this is a 03 series on the Hibiya line in service. It went into service in 1993, and it actually going out of service this year, 2020, because they replaced them. This is at Nakamagoro. Nakamagoro is one of the terminal stations, or where some of the trains through to the Tokyu line. So that you can tell this is a guard at the end of the train, so he has to get out as someone's just mentioned. So this is where he actually has to press the button to give the platform sounds to get the warning that the train's going to depart soon. And this is at Roppongi, and this is in 2018. This is Akita Senju, 2018. And this is an example of a through route train. So this is a Tobu line train, a 2000 series. Actually, this class train just went out of service too. It was built in 1988 and is out of service in 2000. So I'll talk more about this as I go through, but the equipment is through routed, but it's manned by Tokyo Metro crews. So the trains can go through, but the crews do not. They change at the transfer points. And this is at Akihabara Station. This is also at Akihabara. This is in 2020. So this is the newest class cars for the line. And it's the 13,000 series that came in service 2017. One of the notes of one of the reasons why they are swapping to new cars as much as they are is for power consumption reasons after the big earthquake or tsunami, and then the nuclear power plant disaster. They're moving away from nuclear power in Japan, so they actually have power issues. So all the new equipment is much more power friendly. You'll notice it has LED lighting and such like that. It's all to lower power consumption. And this is another shot of a 13,000 series. This is Roppongi this year. Roppongi is a notorious district. That's where the foreign embassies are, but it's also kind of the more sketchy areas of Tokyo. If Tokyo could have sketchy areas, it would be Roppongi. And it's because of all the foreign nationals that live there. Japan's actually, and Tokyo is a very safe city though.
Mark, there's a question from Carl Jackson. Given the density of ridership, why would they have built some lines as narrow gauge with what would be considered full-size cars? And wasn't it just the Ginza line that's narrow gauge, and that was really the earliest subway line?
No, the Ginza is actually standard gauge. So the gauge of the
I think
line
narrow
is,
profile. Maybe he says narrow gauge, but I'm wondering if he means narrow profile.
oh, okay, yeah. So the profile of the Ginza line trains, they're shorter, but they're standard width. So is this. This is a standard width. So these would be 9 to 10 foot wide cars. So is the Ginza, and so is the Marunuchi.
Okay.
We'll get to the low profile trains soon. The track gauge itself is defined by the through route trains that they're running.
Oh, the other question looks like doors and platforms don't quite align, and there's a width gap. Have you seen where wheelchairs are accommodated?
Yeah, they're working towards that slowly, just like anywhere else. They do have platform ramps to aid if that's needed. That you just have to. It's just the platform guards will bring them out if it's needed.
Okay.
But a lot of stations are not accessible. They don't have step-free access. They may have escalators, but no elevators. The Tozai line. The literal translation for Tozai is east-west, and that's what this line does. It goes east-west through Tokyo, and it goes way out of Tokyo. So this is one of the lines that has express service on it, especially out on the eastern side. And they'll have like a Keisai has the platforms are split out, and then there's 2 through tracks to allow expresses to pass through. And so you have to know what if you're on the local express, if it's going to bypass your station. That's important if you want to go to the Tokyo Metro Museum, because that's a Keisai, which is a local only train. So the Tozai line opened in 1964. It's also a 3'6" gauge with overhead, and it through routes with the JR line to the west and the Toyo Rapid line to the east. So this is at Mozen Nakacho station. Train arriving. This is at Nakano, 2018, a 05 train series. 05s came in 1988. This is at Keisai. So the Tokyo Metro Museum is right below this station. This is also at Keisai, but this is the Toyo Rapid Railway train 2000 series. It came into service in 2004. And this is another Toyo Rapid train. This is at Takadanoba. Okay, now we're going to go to the Chiyoda line. This line opened in 1969, another narrow gauge line, 3'6", and it through routes with the Odaku line to the west and the JR Hoben line to the east. And it has a short shuttle line to Kita Ayase, and the reason why that exists is because that's the access to its main yards. This is in 2010, a Kita Senju 6000 series train that went out of service in 2018. It went into service in 1971. And this was what replaced it. This is a Kita Senju in 2015, a 16,000 series train. And this is at Kamazuzeki. This is in 2003, and this is an Odaku line train, 1000 series. And then this is the Tokyo Metro series, 06 series at the same station. This at 2017. This is at Ayase. This is where the mainline metro trains terminate, and then you transfer to the shuttle to get you to Kita Ayase. And at the end of the platform at Kita Ayase, you can see access to its yards. Now we're going to go to the Yoracho line. Don't have the way it goes through the city, but this line opened in 1974. It through routes with the Seibu and Tobu lines on the one end, and it actually shares trackage with another subway line of the Tokyo Metro, the Fukutoshin line. There used to be a line called the Yoracho New Line. That is the Fukutoshin line today. On this, you can see where it shares trackage right here. This is Niigata in 2003. It's a 07 series, which was in service from 92 to 2007. This is in Ichigai in 2010. This is the Seibu line train departing. And then the dreaded platform gates go into effect. So this is at Ichigaya 2017. And this is the 10,000 series. So this series train has both the color striping of the Yoracho and the Fukutoshin line, because these equipment is shared between the two subway lines. So the Hanzoman line, another Tokyo Metro going through the city. It kind of does a little meandering, but it's designed to also help alleviate some of the Ginza line stress among others. It opened in 1978. It's another narrow gauge line, and through it's the Tokyu Denentoshi line to the west, and the Tobu Isezaki line to the north. So this is at Mitsukoshimae, which literally means in front of the Mitsuko department store. And this is in 2018, and this is an 8,000 series train built in 1980 to 1994. And this is at Oshiaji in 2018. This station is near where Tokyo Skytree is, the tallest tower in Japan. So this is where the crews change between the Tobu and Tokyo Metro. So you can see there's a crew change going on. And this is Sumiyoshi in 2018, Tokyo Metro train. And this is in Jimbocho, which is the book district. That's why you can see the books on the side here. And this is a Tokyo 5000 series train going through.
Mark, there were two questions here. The first question, are the stations very deep underground? And the second, there are three questions. Second question, have you or are you going to talk about the Minato
Minato Morai? Yes. Yep.
Minato Mirai.
Yep, Minota Mayari will be on there. Yep.
And I guess Carl Jackson just commented, are those knuckle couplers?
Yeah, those ones are look like it.
Okay.
But as far as the stations deep underground, it depends what it is. When I get to the Oedo line, though, that line is very deep underground. Most of these are moderately underground. I mean, probably similar to New York, maybe a little bit deeper. The newer lines tend to be deeper, though.
And I take it, it looks like there are no rail fan windows. These are all full width cabs?
All full with cabs. Yeah.
Okay.
But if they usually on the conductor on the rear end, they pull the shades up so you can see out the back. If they have a requirement, if they're in the subway, they're supposed to pull the shades down if the operator's in the cab, because to get rid of any light interference. Nambuku line. This is my least favorite to photograph because it's pretty much impossible because the way they went to platform gates. This opened in 1991. It through to the Tokyo line on the south and the Saitama Rapid Railway to the north, and it's narrow gauge. But it also shares a portion of it with the Toei subway line, the Toei Mita line, which is unusual.
Another question, do the deep stations have escalators or elevators?
Escalators are predominant. Elevators are, all the newest stations all have elevators. I believe most of the deep stations, even the older ones, have elevators too, but they predominantly prefer people to use the escalators because it moves more people, obviously. So this is at Meguro. So this is one of the only stations you can capture a somewhat decent shot of the Nambuku line because it's only half height gates. And that's because this line is also shared by the Tokyo line and the Mita subway line. But more traditional for the Nambuku line is the full height gates. So it's you really can't do much there. And the Nambuku line pretty much runs underground for most of its length, or all of its length. So there's no chance of above ground. Moving on, so this is the last of the Tokyo Metro line. So this is the Fukutoshin line. So this is the newest line, opened in 2008. I kind of already mentioned it because it shares part of its track for the Yakucho. This also has local express service on the main subway line. So there's a couple stations where the tracks, the station, it's still an island platform in the middle, but the expresses bypass on the outside of the station. And this through routes with the Tobu and the Seibu. So again, so this is a 7000 series, which is also shared with the Yakucho line. This is in Shibuya in 2008. And this is a Wakoshi in 2010. This is where both the Yakucho and the Fukutoshin terminate or through route to other lines. And it was a snowy day that day. It was cold. This is a photo trackage coming to Shibuya, which you can't get this photo anymore because when Shibuya Station opened in 2008, they hadn't broken through the wall that's on the other side of the station to the Tokyo line. So the center tracks were put in place, but they put bridges to link the two island platforms so you could go between the two sides. But now those tracks do go through into the tunnel on the other side, so you can't get this, there is no bridges to go across the tracks anymore.
Mark, are they using cut and cover or tunneling, or they use a combination?
The original lines were cut and cover, like the Ginza line, but now it's pretty much all tunneling, deep bore tunneling. Okay, like I said, Tokyo has two subway systems, so this is the Toei. Tokyo Metro is much bigger than the Toei subway. Tokyo Metro also makes a lot of money. Toei subway, not so much. But the Toei subway was built for the city itself to serve some of its underserved population centers. Its first line was the Asuka line, which opened in 1960. This is a standard gauge line, but it has overhead. And it's also the first through-routed system of the Tokyo subway system. It through-routes with the Keisai to the north, and then KQ to the south. But the KQ comes off at Sengakuji station, and then just the rest of the subways on its own right over here. But it's because the Asuka line that you can go from Narita Airport to Haneda Airport by train directly, but you have to go through the subway to do it. But there is through service to be able to do that. So this is at Daimon in 2017. This is a Asuka subway train, 5300 series, built in 1991. And this is also Asuka in 2018. And this is a KQ line train, 1000 series, built in 2002 at Oshiaji. And this is at Asuka in 2019, the KQ line, number 600 series, built in 1994. And the Asuka line also has local express service, but there is no bypass tracks. So there's through scheduling that they can run rapid and local service on the same tracks. And this is at Sengakuji. So this is a Chiba Newtown train on 9200 series, built in 2013. This is a Keisai train. This is going to go to the airport. This is at Daimon in 2017. Then the Mita line, which opened in 1968. This is a narrow gauge overhead system, and it through with the Tokyu Meguro line to the south, and shares also a short section, as I said before, with the Tokyo Metro Nambuku line.
Mark, two questions. One is, do the majority of lines feature catenary instead of third rail? Another question is, do the two systems connect, and do they have free transfers or not?
Okay, yeah, so the majority of lines do have overhead catenary. Sometimes it's hard rail, sometimes it's wire. As far as the two systems connecting, so with the exception of the Nambuku and Mita line, which actually do share trackage for a short section, they do not interconnect, and it's not a free transfer between the two. There is platform gates. There are fare gates if you transfer between systems, but it's not like you have to pay a full fare. You pay a transfer fee fare. That's why the fare system in Tokyo is very complicated, because not only do you have the two systems here, but through trains. So you have to figure out what the fare is between those. And I'll talk a little bit about the fare system in a little bit. So this is a Mita line train at Mita in 1998. This was the original Mita terminal. This is a 6000 series. These cars were retired in 1999.
Right? Yeah.
This is also at Mita a little bit later. So this is the 6300 series. So we're built in 1993. And the Mita line goes pretty far out to Nisha Takashima Daira, sorry. So this is the terminal. Platform gates don't help, but you still get this halfway decent shot of the front of the trains. This is at Hibiya in 2017. And then we'll go to the Shinjuku line, which opened in 1978. This is not standard gauge, it's not narrow gauge, it's bizarre gauge, or sometimes called Scottish gauge. So it's 4 foot 6 inches or 1372 millimeters. This line also has local express service, but the trains do have timed bypass areas. One of the more interesting ones is at Awamoto Tocho, because that's a 3-track station. The local will pull into the middle track, depending on predominant directions, to allow an express to bypass at that station. It's very unusual. But this line through routes with the KO line to the west. So this is at Ichigaya in 2003. This series train's been retired. It was built in 78, retired in 2018. This is at Jimbocho in 2010. And this is a KO line train, a 9000 series built in 2001. And this is at Ichigaya. This is one of the newer class trains, the 10300 series, built in 2005. And then Jimbocho.
I remember those cars. Yeah.
And this is Higashi-Ojima. This class train is actually for the KO line. It's actually a KO liner train running in subway service. So this is a very interesting train, the KO liner, the 5700 series. Now I'll talk it again a little bit in the KO line, but this usually runs commuter reserved seat service out of Shinjuku Station on the KO line only. But when it doesn't run on those special trains, it runs at normal commuter service. The difference is when it's in reserved seat service, the seats are turned, turned not horizontally, but they're cross seats. But when it's running in commuter service, those cross seats can rotate so it's longitudinal seating, which is unusual. This is at Iwamotocho, which is near Akihabara. This is the station I was saying that the locals and expresses can bypass on a 3rd track. This is the last of the Tokyo subways, the Oedo line, which first opened, a portion of it opened in 1991, but the full loop didn't really open until 2000. So this is actually a loop line, and it actually is very popular with tourists because it does hit a lot of tourist spots in Tokyo. I wish it was open in the late 90s because I used to stay right by the Tokyo Metro building, which is Tocho Mae, which literally means Tokyo government building, or in front of Tokyo government building. But it's a loop line. All trains start at Hiragaoka, go around, and then terminate at Tocho Mae, and then comes back around and go back to Hiragoka station. And these are times between stations. So this is at Tocho Mae, so that's the 0th point. So you have an idea of how long it's going to get you anywhere. So this line is standard gauge, and has overhead, but it uses limb technology, so linear induction motors. And there's a better shot of that coming. But these also a lower profile train, so you can see it's smaller and narrower because the cost of tunneling is so expensive. They wanted to go with smaller tunnels, so they went through a low profile metro, which seems bizarre in Tokyo.
What's that, classic buses?
I guess, yeah.
This is at near Ueno Station, and this is at Tocho Mae Station in 2010. These views are hard to get because they're now all platform gates on every part of the system. But this shot gives you better, so you can see there's the limb rail between the running rails here for this train. And use of limbs is how they can get lower profile, smaller wheels, because the motors are not there. And this is at Ueno Okachi Machi in 2019. So that's the Tokyo traditional subways. Now I'm going to go into some of the other subway-like systems in the Tokyo area. So you have the Rinke line, which is actually owned by JR, the big JR East, the big commuter system out there. And it opened in 1996, and its whole idea was to open up this new Tokyo waterfront district which was supposed to be all new housing and such for Tokyo, but it turned out to be more of an entertainment district than anything else. But it still needs that access.
Mark,
Yes.
I'm now focusing on the subway lines, not the Rinke line. In general, what was your sense of the average distance between stations?
It depends on the line. The Ginza line has the closest stations.
Or the range?
Probably about half a mile to probably about a half mile, 3/4 of a mile.
I mean, that's my impression also. And then there was a comment, I don't know if you cover it or if that's not a subway, but a commuter rail, the Yamamoto line.
Oh, the Yamanote line,
You're
I'll
going to
talk
cover
about
that, right?
I'll cover that later.
That's a commuter, that's a real hybrid, right? Okay,
Yep.
good, very good.
The Yamanote line's the circle line around Tokyo.
Right. Okay.
This is at Tenozu Isle in 2010. So you can see it's JR equipment running through there. And this is at Kokusai Tenjijo. Another subway in the area is Saitama Rapid Railway, which is basically just an extension of the Nambuku line of the Tokyo Metro. But this runs all underground except for its final stop. And it opened in 2001. It's also considered the most expensive subway to ride in Japan. It's very expensive to ride. That Saitama wants to get their money back. So this is at the end of the line at Yorama Misono, and this is in 2018. There was a big stadium built here, and sometimes this is called the stadium line. So this is actually a Nambuku line train, but the Saitama line also has their own equipment as well. So this is Saitama equipment running on the line. This is the same station, 2018. Yokohama has its own subway system. So it's two-line system, blue line and the green line. The blue line opened in 72. It's actually two separate lines that was finally merged when the other second section opened in 1985. And it's standard gauge with third rail. The green line opened in 2008 and doesn't hit city center. It's kind of periphery line, but it's standard gauge, but is linear induction motors with overhead, so low profile metro.
Mark, any sense on the average running speed on the subway lines, or what's the range? I guess it's probably a range of speeds.
Yeah, so right in the back cab, you can usually, if you're in the back, you can usually see the speedometer. And they run between 50 and 70 kilometers per hour. So about 30 miles per hour. Sometimes it can go up to 80 depending on where it is, which is about 45, I believe. So this is the blue line. This is at Kamigaya Station 2018. It was snowing that day. But this is one of the nice views to get outdoors on the Yokohama. That's looking from the other direction. And Japan loves having little caricatures. I always find that interesting. This is a unique to Yokohama. This is two stations with this kind of design with the arch station with no pillars. It's too bad the platform gates turn away from it, but it's still a good shot to get pictures. So this is at Mitsuzawa Shimocho, and this was in 2018. This is the green line, and this is at Senta Minami. So you can see this looks similar like to the Oedo line, so it's smaller profile. And this is another shot of the green line at Nakayama. You can see the overhead power rail. Also in Yokohama is another subway. This is the Minato Mirai line. It's basically an extension of the Tokyu line, but it serves a very touristy area, redeveloping area in Yokohama along the harbor front. And it opened in 2004.
I may say something, please. It's the according to Wikipedia, it's the shortest rapid transit system in the world.
Other than Minato Marai.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but it may be, but it's all through its service. There's no trains that just run between the two terminals. It's kind of look. This is at Nihon Odori in 2018, and this is at Motomachi Chugaki in 2018. Okay, I'm leaving subways. I'm going to head to the Arakawa line, which is run by the city of Tokyo. So it's a remnant of two former tram lines in Tokyo. Tokyo used to have tons of trams going all around, but they preserved two lines and brought them together because most of the Arakawa line is on reserved right away. So it kind of made sense to keep it, and it served an area that was not very well served by any of the subways. And the gauge for this is 1372 or 4 foot 6 inches. So this is the typical right-of-way center reservation with one lane traffic in each direction on either side. And this is one of the newer class cars, the 8000 series, which a lot of the newer class cars are actually rebodied of the older cars. But it's no short of colors, so it's kind of a nice fun line to write to photograph because all the different color schemes that they have. It's never boring. This is by Shako Mae, which literally means in front of the car barn. You can see the leads coming off over there. And then they have the retro look. So this is a rebodied car, and they put the fake clear story roof on top and kind of try to make it pseudo retro looking.
Mark, was a question, what was your source for the Yokohama subway maps?
I believe that was Wikipedia.
Wikipedia? Okay, thank you.
This is by OG Station 2010, where it takes a pretty tight turn to go underneath the JR line. And this is also one of the sections where it does share road traffic for a short bit. This is at the yards of the Shakomaye. And it has a transfer table at this yards. It's kind of fun to watch it run. This photo is from 2010. A newer shot at the yard. This is from 2010. And this is the interior of a cab of one of the older class cars. It's the operator has knitted over the controls. They put knit. It's just kind of, I don't know. On the main control, the controller looks kind of weird. But I won't say anything more.
Mark, was a question, did you have a problem getting yard access for some of the pictures you got?
No, because I was right at the front. I was basically just off the sidewalk. I mean, the yard's right there, and then the transfer table is just around an alleyway to the side, which you can peek over the brick wall to see.
Thank you.
And the line's been rebranded. It's still the Arakawa line, but they've kind of rebranded it to the Tokyo Sakura tram, and Sakura means cherry blossoms. And this is the reason why, is because a lot of the right-of-way goes by parks and such like that. So when it's cherry blossom season, everyone loves to come out and photograph the trams when it's that season. And I was lucky to do that in 2018. This is Arakawa Nichome. And this is at the one end line at Minawabashi in 2018. So the terminals one is a single track so it drops off people first and then pulls into the tail track for the platform heading outbound. Tokyo has another tram line, but it's run by the Tokyo. It's a remnant of the Tokyo network. This is also 4-foot 6-inch gauge, and it opened in 1925. And the line's pretty short; it's only 3 miles long. And this photo is from 1996 of the cars that were running at that time. These have long retired and replaced by these cars. This is at Yamashita in 2017. So it basically serves as kind of a ring line, well, not ring, but interconnect the inner suburbs of Tokyo, very inner suburb of Tokyo. It connects with the Tokyo line. This is the Odakyu line above here. And then on the other end, it connects with the Keio line, which all radiate into the city. And this is at Miyazaki, and this is the section line that they put grass in the trackway. And this is near the Tokyo, that's the Sanjin terminal, and this was in 2013. So Tokyo's region has all sorts of transport. So I'm going to hit a little bit of the monorails real quick. The first monorail in Japan to open was at the Ueno Zoo. It opened in 1957. That's what this is at the Ueno Zoo. Unfortunately, I never rode it. The day I was here, it wasn't operating because I knew it was going to close. And it did close. It closed in October of last year in 2019 because the equipment's, they can't get replacement parts and they don't know, the city's not sure if they want to spend the money to replace it. Then there's the first true commercial monorail. This is the Tokyo monorail that runs from Hamamatsu to Haneda Airport. And the interesting part of this monorail system is it has local, rapid, and then express trains. So the local takes 24 minutes, but if you take the express, it's 18 minutes from end to end. And there are pass-in sidings on this monorail. So those turnouts get pretty good workout all the time. So this is Tenzu Isle in 2010. And this is at Haneda International Airport Station, which I believe has been renamed Haneda Airport Terminal 3. Another monorail in Tokyo region is the Tama monorail, which is out in the suburbs. And it's near where I usually go to work in Tama, because my company is out near Tama Center. So this line just basically is a crosstown line and links many of the different suburban rail lines that go into Tokyo. This is at Kita Tachikawa in 2008. And then this is a view from my hotel window in Tama Center, and you see the 2 work trains at the end of the beam in Tama Center. I like this hotel room though, because that's just the monorail, but the Odakyu line is right here, and then you can see the Tobu line running past over here. There's always trains going by. This is Dobutsoku, which is near the Tama Zoo. And the line, it's very hilly here, so the line's actually elevating up because there's a hill coming up. I don't have the photo here, but the line also goes through a tunnel because of the hills. This is in 2015. That's at this is the station at that same location. And it's not a monorail if it's not at Tokyo, right? Disney. So this is at Tokyo Disneyland. It has a monorail, and it opened in 2001 as a one-way loop linking the resorts. But unlike the Disneyland or in the Walt Disney World, the monorail is not free to guests or to just average guests. It's free for hotel guests. They'll get a pass. It's considered a true transport company in Japan. They have fare gates. You have to buy tickets and such like that to get on and off. But it has the classic Mickey ears. This is in 2014. This was in 2018. That's the Tokyo Disneyland Hotel behind you. And then there's the interior, complete with Mickey Mouse strap hangers. And
Question mark was, in case of emergency, do you have any insight into how passengers are evacuated?
so if on the beams, so they could walk on the beams because there is a door in the front that in the operator's cab that they can do, but I would assume most likely they're going to use fire trucks, ladders to get everyone down. There is no walkway for those monorails. On the Tama monorail and the Tokyo monorail, there is walkways between the beams for emergencies. There's another monorail. This is Chiba, which is on the other side of Tokyo Bay. And it's a two-line system and opened in 1988, but this is a hang-on monorail. So this is by Chiba Station. So you can walk right underneath the train. You can see the complex track work. This is by the end station by City Hall. This is by the same station, but you could get to see the switch work over here. I forget that this is I didn't write down the station. I think it's the Casa. This is a transfer point to the JR other than at Chiba. One other monorail is the Shoin monorail. This is another hanging monorail serving a very tourist area at Enoshima. And it opened in 1970. It's a single track line with pass-in sidings. So this is one of the stations. This is, I forget the name of the station, but this is the outer terminal station here with the buses below. And you can see it swinging pretty heavily as it's coming out of this curve. And this is it going into the tunnel coming, which is just on the other side of the tunnels, Enoshima, which is the terminal station for the line. And not to be outdone, there's another form of transport. So you have the light, what I call the light metros or guideway trains. Some of them are automated, some of them aren't. This one's not. This is the Leo liner. This is by the Seibu. So this is the Seibu Yamaguchi line. It's called the Leo liner for short because the Seibu Lions baseball team, its stadium is right actually at the station. So the Seibu mainline trains come over here, and then the Leo liner also comes in. And the Leo liner is just 1.7 miles long with 3 stations, and its idea is to link 2 separate Seibu lines that don't link, but they're only separated by less than 2 miles. An amusement park, and then the baseball stadium.
Mark, there are 2 questions. One is, I think, a couple photos back, is the Kamakura the famous temple site with the 130-foot Buddha? And the second question is, from what you know, what was their reasoning for building monorail technology, since it seems to be more common in Japan than almost anywhere else in the world?
It takes a smaller footprint and they can construct it faster, is from what I understand. And why Chiba and Enoshima took to the hanging monorail is not exactly clear. Other than the hanging monorail, they can hang over streets without putting pillars right in the middle of the street. They can put the pillars on the edge easier, but even that, you can do that in regular monorails too. I think it's cost. The monorails are a little bit cheaper to build, especially for, if you look at the train lengths of these, they're not very long, so they're not high density lines.
Mhm.
with the exception of the Tokyo monorail. That's a very dense line.
You're talking about the one to Haneda Airport.
Yep, the other one to Niigata Airport.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Another line is the Nippori Toneri liner. So this opened in 2008, and it was built by the city of Tokyo to serve a very poorly served area of any sort of trains. So they decided to build this as a fully automated, and it's considered the most overused, fully automated line in the world, with a design capacity of 189% during the peak morning rush hour. How you can design something to 189%, but they do. So this gives you an idea what the trackway looks like. This is at Kumanmae. This is where you can transfer to the Arakawa tram line. This is near Nippori. So you can transfer the JR at Nippori or Nippori. This is in 2010. They're ordering more equipment because they need more capacity on this line. If you look carefully, you can see it's packed to the gills. And that's not an operator there, that's someone in a rail fan seat because it's fully automated. As far as dealing with as far as the deal with ice and snow, a lot of the trackways are heated to deal with that. And this is the interior. So they're very small cars. I mean, they're very narrow. That's why these trains get very crowded, but it's cheaper to build and faster to build than a subway. They originally thought of building a subway, but they didn't think the ridership would be enough for it. Another one is the Omiya New Shuttle. This is out of Omiya, which is north of Tokyo's area. It was built in 1983, and it was built mainly to appease the residents because they were building the Joetsu Shinkansen, the high-speed line from out of Omiya, and the residents didn't like this big concrete viaduct going through their neighborhoods. They said it was going to cut it off. So as a concession, they said, well, we'll build this transit system that'll go along the viaduct, so you can actually get into Omiya faster than what you can today. This is at Omiya Terminal, train pulling out. These trains, this class train's already been retired. This view is from the Railway Museum in Omiya, which is one of the largest railway museums, if not the largest in Japan. But the viaduct next to it here is the Shinkansen, the high-speed trains. The advantage of these mini metros is they can deal with tighter radius curves than full-fledged trains. This is coming into Omiya Station. And right below it is the entrance to the Omiya shops for JR. So you can see it's a very tight, with the Shinkansen above, JR trains below, and this is trying to weave between the two. And this is at the station for the Railway Museum. It's actually called Railway Museum Station. And this is the newest class cars on the line, pretty sharp looking, kind of futuristic. And you can clearly see the Shinkansen overhead over there. But you can see how residents didn't like the Shinkansen going through because you got this huge long concrete viaduct forever, basically separating the neighborhoods. One last one is the Kanazawa Seaside Line. This is south of Yokohama. It opened in 1989. This is at Hake Station, and it had an accident just a year or so ago where the train ran the bumper blocks at the end. But this is a fully automated line. They had to figure out why that happened on an automated line. And this is at the other end of the line. Oh, I forget, there's one more line. So there's the Yurika-Mome line, which transfers to the Seagull line. So this line goes into the new Tokyo Bay lands that are there. Just like the Rinke line I talked about earlier, this also serves the Rinke. So the Rinke and this line are basically competitors. It opened in 95 and has 16 stations, 9.1 miles long. And it goes over the Rainbow Bridge in this nice circular loop to get elevation to get onto the bridge itself. This is from 1996 when I was in Japan, and I just read an article that something was opening up. It was Children's Day, and this line was going to be very popular, and I didn't know about it, so I went on it. You can see it's packed to the gills. The other story with that day is I just rode the line out to the end and then back and tried to go through the same fare gates. That didn't work very well because the fare gates don't know how to calculate a fare to and from the same station, at least at that point. So they had to open up the gates manually for me to get out. This is a newer picture. This is 2017 at Toyosu. So you can see Tokyo Bay pretty easily here. It's fully automated. And this is a view from one of the observation decks on it's the Trade Center Tower of the line.
Mark, question, is power collection side mounted?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, now we're going to switch over to the commuter networks. This is the Odakyu line, this is the full network of the system. So you can see it has all the different lines. So it's the locals, the semi expresses, the expresses, and then the commuter expresses, which bypass a lot of stations. The Odakyu towards Tokyo is 4-track. As it goes further out, it's 2-track. But it also has reserved express service, one of the few private railways that does have reserved seating. But you can also see here it through routes into the Chiyoda subway. So this is by Shinjuku Station. This is in 2019. This is an 8000 series train, 1982. So there's 2 road crossings by here, right at the throat to Shinjuku Station. So you can see the tracks as it gets closer, they're fanning out to 4 tracks, which also fan out again because Shinjuku Station for Odakyu is 2 levels as a terminal station. And so during rush hour, these gates are down quite often. I think it's odd that there's still road gates, especially by Shinjuku. This is at Tamasenta. So this is near where I usually am in Japan. And this is a 1000 series train from 1987. This is at Tokai Daigaku Mae, which is basically Tokyo University. That's out on it's outside of Tokyo. It's closer to Odawara than Tokyo. And this is from 2020. Because I was going out there because I was meeting up with a group called the Japanese Railway Society, which I'm a member of, and I happened to be there when they're having a meeting. It was an unusual event. This is at Tamasenta. Now this is actually a Chiyoda subway. So this is a Tokyo Metro equipment on the Odakyu line. So the way the through routes work is the equipment can go anywhere. It's only the crews have to change. So Tokyo Metro equipment is not limited to just stay in the metro portion. It may go out on the commuter lines, just like the commuter equipment will go into the subway. So they do equipment sharing. This is in 2017. This is an example of some of their reserved seat trains. So this is a VSE series. Sometimes they call these sort of the ranch trains that go out to Odawara and Hakone. This series was built in 2005, and the operator sits up here. So if you sit in these seats, you get a great view of the track ahead. But they also have other services. This MSA series from 2008. And then they have the EXE, or sometimes called the Excellent Express. These cars or from 1996. Here the operator sits below, but they don't draw the shades on you, so you can, if you're in the first seats, you can look straight out. And then this is the newest trains, what replaced the original Romance red cars. This is the GSC series from 2018 at Shinjuku Station. And I did ride this from Hakone to Shinjuku, but I couldn't get seats in the front, but I got the first seats in the back of the train. So I got to watch out the back, which is kind of fun too. The KO line, I kind of consider this my home line today because I usually take the KO line out to where I need to work. So the line first opened in 1913, and it's the Scotch gauge of 4'6" inches. It's 88.3 miles in length with 76 stations. And at its most intense point in rush hour on the 2-track line, there's trains running every minute with mixes of expresses, locals, and expresses, and commuter rapids. So this is at Shimo Tokaido, Setagaya transfer. And at this area, there's 20 rail crossings that Tokyo is trying to work with KO to elevate or put this section in subway, because during rush hour, these crosses are closed 40 minutes for every hour during rush hour. So he can never get across these crossings. This is at Shinjuku Terminals, which is a 3-track terminal for the KO, which this terminal, the trains are not here very long. They have to do quick turns because 3 tracks is not enough during rush hour, even though a lot of trains through with the Shinjuku subway. And then this is a KO liner train departing Tamasenta. So I took this train from Shinjuku on the KO liner. The KO liner, the reserved express trains only operate after rush hour because they can't fit them in during rush hour. So the first train departs Shinjuku at 8 p.m. and then they run every half hour to every hour on the 2 main lines for the KO. This is in 2018. So it's 500 yen to get a reserved seat, so about $5. And the seats are cross seats when it's reserved, as I mentioned earlier. But when they outside of the KO liner hours, they are commuter trains.
Mark,
Yep,
there
yep.
are 2 questions. Some of the train sets shown, it looks so sleek. Does that reflect a faster speed, or that's just the design? That's one of 2 questions. The second question, is there commuter train service from the US Navy base at Yokosuka to Tokyo?
Yeah, so some of it is to give an indication of speed. They'll tend to do that more on the reserve trains. It doesn't necessarily mean the track speed is still the track speed, but it gives an impression of speed, and so it's more marketing, I think, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
As far as Yokosuka, there is the Yokosuka JR line that comes near the Navy base. I'm not sure if it's actually how close the Navy base is. So this is at Tamasenta in 2017. And this is a Shinjuku subway equipment at Tamasenta. If you look up here, Tamasenta, you can see Hello Kitty, because Tamasenta is also called Hello Kitty Town because there's a indoor amusement park for Hello Kitty called Sampio. It's called Pyoroland. So if I would never go in there because I would look like a freak as a white old guy going into a kid's park. So I've never gone in there. KO line also has another line. It's called the Inokashira line. This one is not standard gauge. This one is narrow or 4'6". This is narrow gauge 3'6". So it does not interline with the KO main line, but this is operated by the KO. So it's with different equipment, and it intersects with the KO main line at Meidai Mae. one of the other lines is Tobu. So Tobu has two main lines. One goes out of Ikebukuro, out here, and the other one goes out of Asuska, right over here, with some through route trains. And this is one of the largest networks in all of Japan. This is second only to the Kintetsu line. So this line is 463 kilometers long, and it goes out to Nikko, which is a very cultural, religious area for the Japanese. I have yet to get out to Nikko, but I've seen pictures. I really need to. And it also has express service out of there.
Mark, a couple questions. One is, do the subway and other services operate 24/7 or something less than that? Then a question I have, just off the top of your head, how long would you say would be the longest commuter or metro line out of central Tokyo in length?
Well, let's say, yeah, so I mean, Odawara is pretty far, but the Sobu Hoben line goes pretty far out. Are you talking 90 minutes?
Okay.
But there are actually people that commute via Shinkansen, which can go much further,
Right.
to Tokyo, out of Tokyo.
Right, not Shinkansen. But I don't recall that this is a 24/7 system. They run long hours, but not 24 hours.
Yeah,
right?
they don't run, none of the systems run 24 hours. They all start around 5 in the morning, and they all end around midnight,
Right.
to 1 a.m. Matter of fact, they're because of COVID and downturns and such like that, and other reasons, all the lines are cutting back their services by 30 minutes for last train. So the drunks will have to leave the bars earlier when they're ready to leave. Otherwise, they have to get the capsule hotels to spend the night. It's kind of comical to be towards the last trains of the night in Japan. So this is Tobu at Higashi Mukojima. So right below this station, Tobu has its own railway museum. And the railway museum actually has windows underneath this platform here. So you can look up. You can't really get decent shots from the museum at the line, but you can see the trains. The kids love it. This is one of the Tobu's express trains that heads out to Nikko. And you can hear, this is Tokyo Skytree in the background. And this is a Hanzoman Tokyo Metro equipment at the same station, 2015. The Keikyu, this runs out of Shinagawa to the south, as to Yokohama and beyond, but it also serves the Haneda Airport, which is the blue line out here. It's a standard gauge system with 73 stations. A lot of its trains, though, continue through on the Asuska line. And this is actually a very interesting line to get for a photograph. I'll show you in a minute where to do that. But this is at Haneda Airport in 2010. So you could either take the monorail or the Keikyu to go into Tokyo. So this is by Shinagawa, and the train here is on the bridge going over the JR lines at Shinagawa. And this is at a grade crossing. And you get to see a lot of variety of equipment because of what runs on the Asuska subway line also runs on this line. So this is the Keisai line. This is a Narita Airport Express because this is going away from me. So this is heading out to the airports. This probably actually started at Haneda Airport, going to Narita Airport. This is in 2010. Then you get to see this is a Toei Metro Asuska line subway running on the Keikyu. This is the actual Keikyu 1000 series train, same cross and look at the other direction. This is the Chiba Newtown Railway. These cars were retired in 2017. But you notice there's a bus here. So I have a film here where I filmed this crossing for 10 minutes and the crossing was down for nine of those 10 minutes, and was only up for enough to get that bus across, and the gates came right back down. I don't know, you think they would put the bus on a different route with the time that gates are down. But in 8 minutes, the gates were down consecutive. There were 8 trains going either way. Tokyo is another line. So it has two main lines coming out of Shibuya Station, going towards either the west or the south. And it can be traced back to 1908. System is 99.5 kilometers long with 96 stations. It's a narrow gauge, 3'6" with 1500 volt DC overhead. This is at Miyazaki Station. So the Tokyo also has a railway museum for its line, and it's at this station. This is in 2013. This is a Hanzoman line train going through on the Tokyo. And this is another train coming through on Tokyo, same station, 2013.
Mark, a question. These are all the commuter lines are passenger only. There's no freight.
So all the private railways, there's no freight. The JR line does have freight on not necessarily in the inner city. They have separated freight tracks. Actually, some of the former freight lines have been converted into commuter only tracks because the amount of freight through Tokyo is dropped off, diminished. But last year I was at Tachikawa on the Chuo line, and the Chuo lines was severely delayed because there were freight trains going through. So they really don't like to intermix, but on certain sections they have to. So this is also the Tokyo line. This is a Hyoshi, but neither of these trains are Tokyo trains. So the one on the left is a Toei Mita line train, and the one on the right is the Saitama Rapid Railway train that's going to go on the Nambuku line. This is the Keisai. So this is one of the lines I hold a little bit dear to me, only because it was my first private railway that I ran, that I rode on in Japan. So it started operations in 1912 as a standard gauge system. Oh, it is a standard gauge system, and it serves Narita Airport which is and it has faster service than the competing JR Narita Express. So this is at Nippori in 2010. This is a commuter train. The reason why I have 2 platforms here, the platform on the right is for the commuter trains. The platform I'm sitting on is for the Skyliner only. So which is a reserved seat, higher fare train. So they separated by platforms at this station. This is at Ueno Terminal, which is where most of the Keisai trains terminate, except for the ones that go through the subway. This is another one. This is at Narita Airport. So this is just a commuter train. And then this is Nippori in 2010. So this is a Skyliner. So with my first trip to Japan in 1990, I took the limousine bus to the hotel, and I flew down to Kyushu, but that doesn't matter. When I came back to Tokyo, they let me stay a couple of nights so I could explore Tokyo before I had to fly home. And I was going to take the limousine bus back to the airport, but then I saw an ad on the little guide in the hotel room mentioned this Skyliner service. So I decided, oh, I'll take the Skyliner train to the airport. This was before the Narita Airport stations as we know it today existed. So the Skyliner ended at Higashi Narita Airport, which meant you had to get off the train and then go through security, because at that time Narita Airport had security to get into the airport because locals were doing not really terroristic things, but kind of, because I didn't like the airport itself. And then you had to get on a bus to get to the terminal, which was kind of bad. But once they opened up the airport stations, which was actually supposed to be a Shinkansen or bullet train station, then this service became much more usable. So those older AE class trains were replaced and with these newer, sleeker trains in 2010. And this is a fast train well, this is standard gauge, but it goes 160 kilometers per hour. So for Japan, that's pretty fast for a non-Shinkansen service. And you can get from Narita Airport to Nippori, this station, in 36 minutes, which is pretty fast when the old schedule, before they rerouted the airport express, was about 45 to 50 minutes. And the JR Narita Express takes about 55 minutes. Real quickly, so Seibu line, it's 176 kilometers long. It has two groups of lines, the Shinjuku service, and then the Ikebukuro service. And then Toko Yozawa is kind of the hub of the Seibu, where all services kind of go through, and they have limited expresses and reserved seats. So this is at Koko Koen, which literally means airport garden, because this used to be an airport, military airport area. This is 2017. Same area, Seibu. A storm's brewing, so interested in lighting. And this is at, and then this is at Chichichibu. So this is a commuter service coming in. And then this is at Hagiyama. And then this is at Chichichibu, and this is their express service to Shinjuku reserve seats. This equipment set's being replaced with very different looking trains. I wish I unfortunately they went into service after I was in Japan at this point. Very different window configuration. One other one is Tsukuba Express. So this is a very new line, opened 2005. It's considered the fastest narrow gauge in Japan with a top speed of 80 miles per hour. It's 36.2 kilometers long, but it's also odd. And the line has two voltages. So from Akihabara to Moriya, it is 1500 volts DC. Beyond that to Tsukuba, it's 20 kV AC voltage, 50 hertz. So they have two sets of equipment. Not all equipment can go beyond Moriya. And it starts in Tokyo at Akihabara underground. They'd like to extend it to Tokyo Station. And there's still talk about doing that, but it's going to be very expensive. So Akihabara is the terminal, but it's convenient transfers to the JR from there.
Mark, how easy is it to reserve a seat on the reserved commuter services? Is it something you do online? And is it a seat or just you get space on the train?
The reserved seat services, if it's a reserved seat, you get a seat assigned to you. You can do it at the machines or at the ticket windows pretty easily. They're working, it's easier for Japanese to book it online, but they're making it easier for you to reserve, like JR. You can start, you can actually reserve seats before you leave the US if you want on some of these services. This is Minami Senju 2020. Then you got the massive JR East. JR East is the largest of the former JR lines. There's 7 different JR railways in the group currently, with JR East being the largest, and it serves Tokyo predominantly. So this is the Yamanote, the famous Yamanote line that goes around Tokyo. That's the loop line, and then all the lines that radiate from there. Before the subway were built, the Yamanote was kind of where all the private railway stations had to terminate, and then you had to ride well, subways or streetcars or stuff like that to get into the city. The only line that breaks the Yamanote is the Chuo line that goes through this loop. So that's why the private railways were very happy to through the subway so they could break the Yamanote wall to get into central Tokyo. And this is the only grade crossing on the Yamanote line at Komagayome. That's in 2010. Most people do not try to cross this crossing with trains every 2 to 3 minutes in each direction. Those gates are down more than they're up. So this is an E231 class train that was built in 2002. They've been retired from Yamanote service and been reassigned to others. The Yamanote is pretty hard on the equipment, so they do refresh it pretty regularly. So this is the newer equipment. This is at Akihabara. This is the E235s. And it was first introduced in 2015, but due to software and other issues, it didn't really fully enter service until 2019, and now it's replaced all the original 231s. The Yamanote is 11-car trains. Most of the commuter trains are 10, with the exception of the longer distance trains, which can be up to 16. This is at Harajuku. So this is a famous park over here for Yoyogi. There's a beautiful temple, Meiji Maru, I believe is what it's called. And there's also, it's in the background, if you can barely see it, that's the imperial platforms. If the emperor wants to take a train ride out, that's where he would go out of. This is at Ocharimizu. This is an older class Chuo line train. So over here, that's the Marunuchi line train crossing over the Kanda River. This is the Chuo line, at Tokyo Station. The Chuo line platforms are above the rest of the platforms. They've had to squeeze the platforms in Tokyo as the Shinkansen came in. So they had to elevate the Chuo lines, and then they built platforms underneath the station as well. This is the Kei Tohoku line at Ueno Station before the platform gates came in. So this is in 2003. This is the Keio, not to be confused with the Keio private line, but it's spelled differently, different kanji characters. This is the Keio line at Meihama Station, which is for Tokyo Disney. So there's Tokyo Disneyland Hotel. But don't do the mistake of me. I accidentally got in the commuter rapid, which is the only Keio line that doesn't stop at Meihama Station. And the next stop was 20 minutes away. So it was 40 minutes round trip because of a simple mistake. This is at Narita Airport. This class train is going away, but this commuter train, also you get the Narita Expresses out of Narita Airport on the JR. So Narita Airport has, so this is the JR platforms. Those platforms over on the other side is for the Keisai. So they share the terminal area, but they don't share trackets because again, the JR is narrow gauge and the Keisai is standard gauge, and they have separate tickets, gates and such like that. This is on the Chuo line. So this is a long distance reserve train coming out of Tokyo Station. This is at Shinjuku, which is the busiest station in the world. I'll talk more about that. This is another station, another train at Tokyo, Chuo line. This is probably Hitachi. It's Hitachi Seikaki service. So this is a reserve service out of Ueno Station in 2015. This is at Tamachi Station. So this photo is taken from the Yamanote line platform. So they have linked platforms. So the longer distance trains can go between Shinagawa and Ueno Station. Originally, a lot of trains terminated at Shinagawa or at Ueno Station because the platform space at Tokyo was so bad. But they finally linked those lines. So now the trains can actually through route, which gives a little bit more balance for service for them. So they don't have to have so many trains terminating. They can through route them. This is E353 style train at Shinjuku in 2019. This is a JR Hitachi at Ueno Station in 2010. It's raining. This is an older class, much older class train. And this is at the underground platforms at Tokyo Station in 2003. And then there's the Narita Express. This is at Narita Airport in 2020. Usually I don't take the Narita Express. Usually I take the Keisai because it's cheaper and faster. But sometimes I'll take the Narita Express. And if I have a JR pass, then I definitely take the Narita Express. And this is at Shinagawa. So I have a good quick story for Narita Express. My wife and I I was going to a conference in Kyoto, and so we flew into Narita, and I already looked at the schedules, and I had the JR pass, and JR pass only allows you to ride the only certain Shinkansens on the Tokaido line. You cannot ride the Nozami, which is the faster service. So I could only ride the Hikari down to Kyoto. And there was a big weather system. So Narita Express was running late, which I know that's unusual, but the trains do run late sometimes in Japan. And it was running 30 minutes late, but they sold me the ticket on the Hikari, which was the last Hikari out of Shinagawa station for the day. And so I'm monitoring the timing as we're going through, and I knew it was going to be close. I figured we would have a 5-minute window. But then we got to Tokyo Station. I forgot that they split the train at Tokyo Station, and the train, and my section of train, which stops at Shinagawa, was the second train to depart Tokyo. And I could have transferred to Tokyo Station, but the Narita Express station is deep underground, and the Shinkansen platforms are pretty far away. So I didn't want to drag my wife through Tokyo Station trying to make the train on time. So I said, okay, we'll transit, go to Shinagawa. So the train pulls at Shinagawa, and I'm looking at the Shinkansen platform, which is just basically on the other side of a wall. And I could see the our Shinkansen was pulling in as we were coming to a stop on our train. So I told my wife, we got to run. So we ran. You have to go upstairs, cross over, go through the Shinkansen ticket gates, and then run downstairs. I was flying down the stairs with my roller suitcase flying down the stairs with me. My wife was trying to keep up because the Shinkansens don't wait for anybody, typically. But the conductor was on the platform, and he saw me flying down the stairs. He probably knew, oh, it's a tourist. He probably has a JR pass, and I am the last Hikari of the night. So he held the train probably about 30 seconds, because we definitely left later than normal, probably 30 seconds to a minute late. But he held it so we could at least get onto the train and waited for my wife to get on board. And then as soon as she got on board, the doors closed, and then we had to figure out where we were seating. It was kind of a stressful day. And this is the older class that's since been retired of the Narita Express on the lower level platforms in Tokyo. So just some random stuff. So JR Pass. So this is from 2015. I got this pass. That was for that trip, I believe. So this is the JR National Rail Map. So if you can get a JR pass, it's good on all the JR lines. And if you just do one round trip between Tokyo and Osaka, the pass pays for itself pretty easily. And then there's two classes. You can get ordinary, or you can get a green car, which is first class. And it's not just good on the Shinkansen, it's good on any JR train and the Tokyo Monorail, because JR owns the Tokyo Monorail. Some tickets, so a lot of the subway system or even private railways do have one-day economy passes. Sometimes they call them a free kipu, like this Hakone weekday pass. they call them free tickets. They're not free. You pay for them. It's free access to the system. So these are the older type tickets. This is the ticket machines in the commuter stations. This is not just a route map. It actually tells you if you it's not really great focus here, but it tells you how much that fare would be to go between where you are today, where you're at that moment, and where you need to go. Then there's seat reservation tickets. So this is for the Shinkansen. This says I'm going from Shinosaka to Tokyo, and tells me the date and the time, and then the car number, the seat row, and the seat number, the seat assigned. So A would be window, and whether it's smoking, non-smoking. This ticket is one of my prizes of the collection because I was in Japan for the Nagano Olympics in 1996. And this was on the final day of the Olympics. I was with a coworker and I said, we're going to Nagano just because we're going to Nagano. We're not going to see any venues, but we took the Shinkansen there. So this says from Nagano to Takasaki. So that was when we were coming back. We did get to see the final medal ceremony, but that's all we got to see. But it was still cool to be and say, hey, we got to the Olympics. But this is the most of what tickets are today. So the Japan calls them IC cards. So basically like NFCs. So they're stored value cards, so you can put value on there, and then it auto calculates fares for you as you go through. And each city has its own, but Japan's worked hard to have them all interconnect. So Pasmo is by Tokyo Metro, but it works all around. Monaca, I believe that is. I forget what city that is. Ayakoka, that is Osaka area. And then this is actually a Suica card. So this is by JR East runs this, but you can tap in and out and it calculates the fare. So transfers are automatically done. And you can also use it to buy stuff in the convenience stores, not just at the stations, but most 7-Elevens will take it as a currency.
Mark, there are two questions. One, I'm assuming this is for the commuter, but it could be for the metro, the subway. One is, do people smoke in stations or is it prohibited? And the second is, can you easily get by using English?
Tokyo is very easy to get by English. They've worked very hard, especially since Tokyo was supposed to hold the Olympics. They've worked harder than ever to make English much easier to deal with than just dealing with Japanese. As you go in the rural areas, it gets a little more difficult, but it depends. I think from 1990, it was really bad. It was very hard. It's much easier now. But if you know a little Japanese, it does help. I learned to read kanji characters because of the railways, because I would memorize what the station kanji were, and then I would learn what that kanji means. Mm-hmm. And that's how I learned kind of how to do that.
And do people smoke, or is it prohibited, or do they observe no smoking?
There's smoking areas they can smoke. The commuter trains, there's no smoking. A lot of the long distance trains, they'll have a smoking room or area. I don't think they have smoking cars anymore. They kind of moved away from that. They started taxing cigarettes very heavily about 5-6 years ago. Okay. So it's really helped reducing the amount of smoking, but it's still a lot more than here. They still smoke a lot. Mm-hmm. Before the IC cards, you had these cards. These were magnetic stored value cards, so you could even add stuff to that. They were more collectible than the IC cards. Every system had its own, and they usually had limited editions and such like that. What was neat though, if you look on the flip side, I should have scanned one. It actually shows you the stations you went in and out of in very small print. Amazing how those the fare gates, you shoot it in and it shoots out the other side so quick, but still can print on the other side. It's amazing. Try that on the Metro card. Shinjuku Station, just real quick, this is the It's not a very impressive station to look at necessarily, although they have spruced it up quite a bit, but is the largest or busiest train station, and not just in Japan, but in the world. Because it has the JR line, it has the KO line, the Doku line, it has 3 subway lines coming through it. There's a bus terminal, there's department stores, shopping arcades. But JR is the biggest one. This is the entrance to the JR station. It first opened in 1885. The JR alone has 16 platforms because of all the commuter trains that go through there. It is a maze, and even the Japanese get lost in that station. It's just, there's corridors going every which way. So this is the JR platform. That's the Yamanote. That's a Sobu local train over there, Sobu Chuo. And then this is the fare gates. It's always busy. This is an example towards the tail end of rush hour on the Yamanote line from a few years ago. So the Japanese are very good at lining up. There's actually marks on the platform on where they're supposed to stand to start their line. And you can see they do have door guards ready to help push if they need to. They don't push necessarily much anymore, but they still get very crowded. This picture was taken when I had my son and my wife with me, and then I asked my son, "Hey, you want to ride the Yamanote line during rush hour?" It was late rush hour, but it was about 8:30, and he said sure. So we went on the Yamanote line. We were at the very front of the train, so we could see out the front window. And someone in the car, as the train was coming to a station, and he hit the brakes pretty hard for some reason, and someone somewhere halfway down the car must have tripped or something and fell, because it was like dominoes, and we were at the end of the domino effect. So we were smushed against the window at the front of the train. My son still thinks of that experience pretty well, though.
Oh yeah, I want to know something. How is it dealing with this overcrowding during COVID? It must be disastrous.
So COVID has changed stuff in Japan. Usually, it used to be that companies would never allow their workers to work remotely, but now they are. They are still crowded. But one thing about the Japanese, even before this, they tend to wear, I don't want to politicize anything, but they tend to wear face masks when they're ill to ride the trains. And so when this happened, the face masks just came on instantly. Yes, they did have a COVID outbreak, but I think they did a relatively good job of trying to control it, considering how crowded. It's not just the trains, everything in Japan's crowded. But again, they did, like my company in Japan, they're allowing their people to work from home, which is that's very unusual. So their service is about 60 to 70% of normal. But when you have a capacity rated at 150 to 180% during rush hour, it's still pretty crowded if you're 60, 70% of that. This is just another entrance to Shinjuku Station for the JR, and then this is the entrance to the Odaku line over here, and then this is the KO line entrance over here. But the corridors are all interconnected. I think I already showed this picture, but it's the Odaku at Shinjuku, and it's the KO at Shinjuku Station. Ueno Station is kind of a nice, neat older station in Tokyo. It was a big terminal station, not as much as it used to be with the Shinkansen and through routing of some trains to Tokyo Station. But it's still a busy area, and I tend to like going through it because I prefer transferring to the Keisai at Ueno Station rather than Nippuri. But they have nice artwork over the fare gate, over the ticket machines, and over the fare gates. And then Tokyo Station, which is not the busiest station, that's Shinjuku, and it's only the 8th busiest in Japan. I mean, but I think it's also the 8th busiest in the world, because I think most of the top 10 are all in Japan. So this station opened in 1914. Some say it was patterned after Central Station of Amsterdam, but there's a lot of conjectures that says that is not true. But it is a busy station, since it is a terminal station for the Shinkansen, both the Tokaido line of the JR Central lines and the JR east Shinkansen lines on the Joetsu, Hotoku, and Tohoku lines. But there is the interesting thing about the Shinkansen is the JR Central Shinkansen has no track connections to the JR East Shinkansen. They're totally separated because it's different, totally separate railways. And the platform gates are separate too. So they've turned the main building into a hotel, so you could actually stay. But none of the windows face the platforms. They all face the Marunuchi side of the building.
Mark, was that station rebuilt from World War II, or did it survive World War II?
It had to be restored post World War II. It did get damaged. It also got damaged in the great earthquake in 1916.
But it's an authentic restoration, as
Yep.
far as we know.
Yep, authentic. They actually restored these towers had disappeared. They restored them back.
Oh, very nice. Beautiful station.
And this is the interior of one of the dome areas. They did a really nice job inside. This is looking up from the dome. And then entrance to the ticket gates. And then the 0 point, so this is 0 kilometer point on one of the platforms. So this all measure of at least the JR railways, doesn't matter what JR line is, are all measured from this point. So this 0 point. And then this is the busy concourse, one of the busy concourses of the station. So a little bit, I still have time. So JR Omiya shops. So usually on a trip, I usually fly home on a Saturday or Sunday back home. And the night before, I try to stay in Tokyo. And I usually try to use the night before or the day before and then the morning of to do something in Tokyo or something that usually some rail fan and such like that. I check out of the hotel usually at 7 in the morning, stick my luggage into a locker at Ueno Station, and then go to town. And I had learned that JR Omiya was having an open shops day for people to go through. So I said, okay, I'll go up there. It's 20 minutes by Shinkansen, about 30, 40 minutes by commuter train to Omiya. So I did that before I had to get back to Tokyo to get to the airport. So they gave you pretty good access. I mean, you couldn't walk through the areas, but they had gated and you could go through. You can see it's very popular with families. They also had a swap meet that was fun to go through. It's one of the electric locomotives in the shops. One of the express trains undergoing renovation. Another electric locomotive. And it doesn't just repair JR equipment. So this is a Doku line train that they're working on. It's outdoors. That's the Shinkansen up there. And they were giving rides for people if they want to ride the transfer table. And they pulled out some of their nice equipment out for the public to get photos of. They're very rail fan friendly overall in Japan. They like doing these open days for families and rail photographers. This is a crocodile, diesel electric. Now I'm going to slowly move outside of Tokyo. So this is Enoshima. So I already talked about the Shoen monorail earlier. Enoshima is classified as a railway, but it's more like a tramway because there is actually some street running. And this is by the famous Buddha at Hayase. So it runs from Fujisawa to Kamakura. So this is the street running section. So this train is rather large, and it's just coming out of this street running portion, which has traffic in both ways. And cars have to pull over to let the train go through. So he's usually blaring his horn. There's warning lights in everywhere, trying to get people to get out of the way. Japanese are pretty good about that, but there's always that one errant driver that's like, oh, there's a train. This is at Enoshima, or this is, yeah, Enoshima Station. So a lot of times, most of the times, one-car trains, but this one's a two-car train. They have their retro look train with the flake clear story and fancy paint job. It's a Fujisawa. So this is why this line's popular, because it's the Buddha, the largest Buddha in Japan. Now we're going to Hakone, which is on the very edge of Tokyo. This is where the Odakyu line comes out of to Odawara. It is an interesting railway in itself because it has a switchback system to get up the hill up here. The system this is standard gauge, and it's part of the Odakyu group, but the Odakyu is narrow gauge. And for the Odakyu trains to go from Odawara to Hakone Yamato, they needed narrow gauge. So originally the Hakone Tozen line went down to Odawara, but they cut it back to Hakone Yamato, and only to get rid of the dual gauge section. So there's only a small section of dual gauge to this station, Ireda, because that's where the shops are for the Hakone Tozen. This line was heavily damaged in 2019. It was closed, but because of a typhoon, but it was fully restored in July this past year. So this is Hakone Tozen, but this is a narrow gauge train here. This is standard gauge on the side at Hakone Yamato. This is the romance car train on the side that came from Shinjuku, or will be going to Shinjuku. This is a little bit further down the line. This is passing area. Yeah, no, it's double track. But this station's interesting because there's actually a little shrine just off to the edge on the platform. So it's interesting that there's a shrine there. Yeah, it is platform. So this is it going into the tunnel. And this is one of the older class cars. This is at Gora, which is the outer end of the line. This is where Hakone is famous for the circle tour. So you take out of Odawara, you take the train to Hakone Yamato, then you take the Hakone Tozen line, which is this line, to Gora, and then you transfer to the funicular to go up the hill. These cars were just replaced last year, so these are the older cars. And then you hop on a ropeway, and not just one ropeway, you hop on two different ropeways. They actually replaced one since my last trip. This is from the recent trip I did. So you take a ropeway, and then you go on down to this lake, Lake Asahi. To take a boat, a real pirate boat, not to go across the lake. Why people do this? Because typically, if it's a beautiful day and the clouds aren't there, you should be able to see Mount Fuji. But I've never been able to see Mount Fuji. Doesn't matter whether it's sunny or overcast. Never been able to see it. And then why to call it loop is after you get off the boat and you actually go into Hakone proper, you can either reverse direction or take a bus back to Hakone Yamato to complete the Hakone loop. And it's very famous for hot springs, this area. A small tram system, this is in Toyohashi, which is not that far out of Nagoya over here. And it's just a small little city tram system. I mean, they have 3 services, but it's really one main line and then one branch line. Alternate, the trams alternate. They only use this for during rush hours. They need a little extra service. This curve here, this is to the new branch line here, is considered the tightest tram curve in all of Japan. Fortunately, I didn't get a picture of it because I was running out of time. But this is in the city proper, going towards the JR station. So this is they have this is considered a low floor car because this area is low floor. So it kind of ramps up on either end to go over the bogies. This is older class car. This is at Toyohashi JR station. And then this was a special train, and I wish I had known more about it because maybe I would have made time for it. But this was a beer tram, so they were going to have serve beer on this tram as part of a kind of little party. Hiroshima, which is the largest tram network in Japan. It started in 1910, and the system's 21.8 miles long. See all the services. I haven't been in Hiroshima in a while. This was from 2003, but nice thing about Hiroshima is they have all different classes of trams. So the classic tram, articulated tram, a little bit older style, a little bit newer single tram, a little bit older articulated tram. It's going to Hiroshima port, so this is going on the interurban portion of the system. And then this is a newer Siemens, they call it the green mover tram. And of course, Hiroshima, that's where the atom bomb was dropped. That's the ground zero for the prefectural office. And then this is the Peace Park, looking towards the bomb out area. And they recently restored one tram that is from the pre-bomb era to service. Toyama. It's another small little city. This is on the Sea of Japan side. It has basically 2 tram networks that has been merged into one. Originally it was the city service, and then this was originally a JR line to the port, but they converted it to a tram light rail service. And just within the last year, they connected these underneath the station, and that was part of the Hokuriku Shinkansen that was open. So I haven't been there since that Shinkansen opened. I really need to go back there. But this photo is from 1999 because I used to stay in Niigata a lot, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. At one of the ends of the tram lines. This is by the Ekimae, so this is in front of the station. 2010, and then they opened up a loop line through downtown. So this is what Centran. So this is one of the ones that goes around the inner city loop. And again, this is a great area to take pictures of the tram. This is just in front of the JR station, but this is again changed because they now have tracks going this way because to connect with the port tram, they had to extend the line underneath the station. This picture is a sad picture for me. You see, it's raining, but this was the last picture I took on with my Olympus C3030 because about 15 minutes prior, I fell into a puddle and my camera went right into it, in with it. It seemed to work okay after I had it off, and it seemed to work fine. So okay, I'll keep doing photos. So I took this photo, and that was the last photo I ever took. It decided it wasn't going to work anymore. This is the port tram So this was the converted JR branch. So it went from like the JR branch had maybe hourly service at best to every 15 minutes with the trams. And this is the section where it's off of the old JR line and it's going through street running, reserve street running to get to the back of the station for Toyama. Toyama also has a private railway, the Toyama Chicho line. So this is narrow gauge. It's like very much like an old style interurban system of the U.S. But they do have reserved express trains because the part goes out to a famous loop where you can go onto a trolley bus, 2 trolley buses and a train and such go by the Korobe Dam. So it does have some tourist aspect to it. It's not just for locals. But that's one of the hand-me-down trains from some other line, I'm sure. This is by Wozu. The reason I was over here at this time was for a customer out by Wozu's. I was staying at not this hotel, but another hotel. So this is the JR, although it's no longer JR line, it's now been privatized to a different third sector railway. And again, it's at Wozu. And this is back at Toyama. So I did ride the line once. After the customer meetings and my compadres from ASMJ, they said, okay, we're going back to Tokyo. I said, I'll take a later train because I want to take the local train to Toyama. And then I'll take the express train back later. They thought I was crazy, but that's okay. That's at Wozu again. Or actually that's Shin Wozu, new Wozu station. Just a little bit further down the line from Toyama is Takaoka, which has its own small city tram system. I used to serve ferries that went across the sea of Japan. There used to be a line from Toyama also going out, but that's long since gone. But this was from 1998 when I was staying in Niigata. After going to Toyama, I went to Takaoka. This area has changed quite a bit from this photo. This is a little bit newer photo, this is 2008. So now they have newer trams and they've spruced up the station, but now this terminal has been moved to be closer to the JR station, which is in the background. And Takaoka Ekimae just literally means Takaoka station in front of Takaoka station. So a little bit about Nagaoka, Niigata, why I do this. I stayed in the late 90s a lot in Nagaoka, Japan for work, to service a customer out there. And so I got to know this area quite well at the time. This Nagaoka station. The station itself's not very remarkable, but we had there was a lot of equipment here. That's the Shinkansen station up there. The regular trains were down on the street level. I was back there just a few years ago for a different reason, and they kind of spruced up the station, added artwork and such like that, more walkways. And this is the Shinkansen double-decker. I forget what series that is, maybe E3 series there, and then they have the express trains down on the regular level. But what's more interesting here is in 1998, when I was there, they gave me the keys to the company's rental car. So on the weekend, I could go places. And so I wanted to check out this Niigata Kotsu, which was basically an old interurban line that used to link the city Niigata to Nagaoka at one point, but had been cut back many times over the years. And so I wanted to chase this interesting line. What I didn't know is these photos were taken April 1999, 1998, but in April the following year, the line closed. So I never got to write it, but at least I got to chase it a little bit, which was interesting. This is at Niigata terminal of the line. Originally, the line went actually City Street running further into Niigata, but they cut it back to the very edge of downtown, and go figure, ridership dropped off. It was mostly used by school children, in all honesty. And this is at Tukigata. This is the outer end of the line. These platforms still exist, and they moved some of the old equipment to this location as kind of like a little mini museum to the line. I haven't been there since they've done that. I'd like to, though. And this is at Niigata end. It's got snow plow because it does snow, and very much so in Niigata Prefecture.
It's off for some reason. I don't know why.
Got a work train here. I think that's a former Odaku train behind there. These third sector railways do tend to get hand-me-downs a lot from the main lines. And then just to round out the presentation, it's hard to talk about Japan without talking a little bit about the Shinkansen. I'm not going to spend a lot on the Shinkansen because that could be its own presentation in itself. But this is an idea
Those
that
speakers or headphones are plugged in. Well, why aren't they plugged in? Can I pull something out?
So this is the current network as it is today. So the Kyushu Shinkansen opened up just a few years ago. The Hokkaido Shinkansen going through the Seikan Tunnel, the second longest tunnel in the world, or underwater tunnel, or it's the first. And it ends currently at the Shin Hakadote. Eventually they want to get to Sapporo, but this is operated, that portion is operated by JR Hokkaido, which is hemorrhaging money. So I'm not sure if they're going to ever finish it to Sapporo, but hopefully they do. The idea was to be competitive from Tokyo to Sapporo by train instead of by plane, because one of the busiest air corridors in Japan is between Tokyo, Haneda, and Sapporo airports. But the fastest train to Shin Hakadote right now, I believe, is 5 hours, which is, it's hard to beat. The plane will still beat that, and then you still have to get to Sapporo. So I'm not sure if it's ever going to beat there. The busiest Shinkansen is the Tokaido line. This is the one that the first one that opened in '62 between Tokyo and Osaka, or Shin Osaka actually, and that's run by the JR Central. The Tohoku, Joetsu, and part of the Hokuriku Shinkansen operate by JR East. And then you got JR West, which runs the Sanyo Shinkansen, and also this part of the Hokuriku Shinkansen. And then you already mentioned the Kyushu Shinkansen down there. The only construction, there is construction going up in Hokkaido, and then also the extension of the Hokuriku Shinkansen. There is plans to make it to Kyoto. And then this dotted line is the Chuo Shinkansen, which is under construction, and that is the maglev, which will seriously cut times down severely. So from Tokyo to Shin Osaka, the fastest service, I believe, is about 2.5 hours, maybe 3. But the Chuo Shinkansen should cut that not quite in half. So this is an old station, old photos from 1990 from my first trip. My first Shinkansen trip was I almost missed it. I was down in Kyushu, staying at Oita for work, and for the weekend, me and my 2 fellow American coworkers wanted to do something, and we talked to the admin there, and we said we want to go to Hiroshima. So we took a plane over to Hiroshima, but she made all the arrangements to say, okay, you need to be at Hiroshima train station at 6 p.m. to catch to get to Hakata to catch a local train that gets close to where we were staying at Kamazuzaki. And then a taxi will meet you there to take to the hotel. So we had to meet these trains. And we gave one fellow coworker had the train schedule, and it was his job to make sure he got on the train on time. But he got confused with military time because everything's a military 24-hour clock time. And so we thought we'd get to the train station early. So we did get to what we thought was early, but then we went up to the ticket windows to buy our tickets, and the ticket guy said, "No time, no time, run, run." So we literally ran. We ran through the ticket gates. We didn't pay. We ran through the ticket gates as the train was stopping to get on the train to go to Kokura. We did pay for the tickets when we got off the train in Kokura, but it was kind of crazy. That was the last time I trusted someone else with train time. So Tokaido line, this would be a 200 series on the Tokaido line. This is in Hiroshima in 2003. But the real more interesting, I consider the Shinkansen network, is the JR East because of the variety of equipment. So they have double-decker equipment. They're getting rid of the double-decker equipment. It's going to be on for a little bit longer because of the flooding of the Shinkansen yards from the typhoon that they had. They lost 10 train sets, which is forcing these trains to run longer. The reason why they don't really like them because they're slower loading because of the double decker. But this is an example of different types of equipment on the JR East Shinkansen network. That would be the JR Central, the Tokaido Shinkansen over there, which are all pretty much the same. This is going to go out to Nagano and Toyama. Saw at Tokyo Station. This is 2015. And then they do run coupled sets. So these are 2 double deckers. I think these are the E7s, coupled. This is the older Nagano Shinkansens. Snowing. And then this is at Shin-Yokohama. So this is the Tokaido line Shinkansen. They're all pretty much these trains now. They retired some of the others. They do have newer class trains, but they don't look overly different. The nose shape changes, but the color variation, there is none. They're all white with blue stripes. And that would be it. So thank you. This is me at riding the romance car at Hakone. This is a steam train on the Chichichibu that runs on the main line for the Chichichibu. They do run steam trains on main lines pretty regularly. And it was actually considered a regular service. You just had to pay $3 to ride it.
I don't know. That's it, Jeff. So Mark, thank you very much. This was a really fascinating presentation. Very well structured and organized. I think we could all applaud. We would applaud. What I'll ask you to do is, if you can stay on for a few minutes, unshare your screen, and you can stick around for a few minutes so people can ask you questions or say hello. I have given you all the
I think he unmuted us for
to unmute.
Yeah, there we are.
And you can turn on your videos. If you have comments, you can put them in the chat. You can email me. I put it in the chat. My email is bnnyc1955@aol.com. Mark's is subwaymark@gmail.com. The next show is December 18th. Andrew Grawl, our program chairman, will be presenting. If you are interested in making a presentation, I got one request. Just email me with your idea. I will pass it on to Andrew Grawl. And with that, I open it up.
This is ALT.
To the group.
Excellent show, Mark. Excellent.
Thanks, Ron.
It's a really excellent show.
Thanks, Mark. That steam train you showed at the end, is that the one that's on Kyushu?
No, this one is actually not far out of Tokyo. This is on the Chichichibu, and they run it on most weekends and sometimes on weekdays as a regular scheduled train.
Yeah,
You
they
just
have one on Kyushu out of Kumamoto, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
part of that one.
Oh, my knees from sitting so long.
Mark,
I could not tell you about the streetcars in Japan, but I could tell you about all the bars outside the Yokosuka Naval Base back in 1959, 61.
I've been there too.
Probably plenty of them.
Mark, I'm sorry you missed that beer tram.
Yeah, I know. I was kind of, especially if they actually had the beer girls, so they were dressed appropriately. So.
Oh my God.
Mark, my name is
That was a great show.
Thank you.
Mark. My name's Harvey Lehner, and I'm in Los Angeles, and it was a wonderful show. I used to go to Japan. First went there in '79, and I remember wanting to take a subway ride, and so I went to the Akasaka Mitsuki subway station, and I was told at the desk of the New Otani Hotel where I was staying that it'd be real easy to ride because there's English. And I went down into the subway, and I saw a sign that said ticket machine. I was really lifted. I said, that's great. That was the last English I saw back then. And so I'm really happy to see with bringing me up to date on what it's like now. There's a lot of English, and that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, all the ticket machines now have an English button, and we'll actually speak to you in English.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it was a wonderful program, and I really appreciate the effort you put into it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I like the.
Mark, have you taken this Seikon tunnel?
No, I haven't. I've been trying to figure out how to do that. I
was actually stationed at an air base right near there, 85 to 88, when it opened. So the boss, I didn't get to go to the ceremonies that the wing commander got to be the representative. So he knew I love trains, so he gave me all the mementos from the Seikon tunnel opening. For a while, it may still be true that you can actually take the train into the tunnel. The middle of the tunnel, the train will stop. You can get off, have a little tour of the tunnel, then get on the train and go to Hakodate.
Yeah,
Hakodate still has, I think, a really quaint 2 or 3 line tram system, which is why we went there.
Yeah, that's really why I want to go, because I want to go to Hakodate to ride the trams.
Hakodate also has a cable car that goes up to a mountain outside the town, looking down like Rio de Janeiro. It's really a pretty place.
Nice.
Mark, I'm wondering about the romance trains. It doesn't look like there's enough room on top for the operator's cab.
Yeah, so I watched, a ladder comes down, and so he can get up there. But so he must be reclined is the only thing I can think of, because there is it's definitely not standing room up there.
No, it's small.
It's very small.
I'm just thinking he might be operating on his belly. Maybe he's kind of like lying down, operating controls. Maybe, I don't know.
No, he's definitely not, because I can see he's sitting up, but his legs are probably like in a reclined position.
Like in a fighter jet.
Yeah, like a fighter jet.
What about the Meitetsu? The Meitetsu has some cars also with like the engineer on the second, but it looks taller.
Yeah, they do. Meitetsu out in Nagoya. Yeah, they do. I haven't really ridden the Meitetsu except for a short segment. I need to do that. I haven't really been to Nagoya much. I need to.
There's also a good museum in Nagoya. I think it's the second biggest of the rail museums.
Yeah. Yes, I've been there. It's the S.C. Maglev Museum.
Yeah.
And then the museum in Kyoto, the Umakoji, is now it's been totally changed and it's totally expanded. And I haven't been there since they expanded, because the Osaka one moved. to basically the Kyoto Museum. So that's now a major museum. It's all the JR. So the one in Nagoya is owned by JR Central. The one in Kyoto is basically semi-owned by JR West, and then the one in Omi is owned by JR East. So a lot of the railways like to have their own museums, and it's like a competition. Who can be bigger and better?
Yeah, the Kyoto one, because I was in Japan in 2017, the Kyoto one, I think, had fairly recently reopened with all that expansion.
Yeah, I missed it by a year.
Any other comments or questions for Mark? And if,
Excellent show against a fantastic amount of detail.
Yes, I say the same. Exceptional show, very well organized, and incredible knowledge of not only the system but the entire country of Japan. I never realized that they had such an extensive rail system from north to south. Really, amazing. I knew about Tokyo, I knew about the subway, but never realized how extensive the rail system is, and really it's truly amazing. And I say a wonderful, well organized presentation. Thanks so much for doing it.
I have a question.
Yes.
say something.
What is Hiroshima like right now? I know it's quite a few years afterwards, but still, is there any kind of feeling about it, among the Japanese?
Hiroshima is they are, well, let's put a couple of things. So the first time I went to Hiroshima and the second time at Hiroshima, one thing I did notice is that people who are local Hiroshimans are shorter than the average Japanese, but they are very pacifist, and I can understand why. But they don't seem to hold grudges. They did restore that one tram as a memorial tram that they do run in service, that I read about, that I'd like to see. But overall, I mean, it's just like any other city. It's very bustling. It's been totally rebuilt, but there's no tall buildings in Hiroshima, not like other big cities. They're pretty like 3-4 story buildings. That's pretty much it.
I was in 20, I have to think there might be something in the 6, 7, maybe a little taller now. Because I was there in 2017.
Yeah, that's probably true then. Yep.
Thank you, Mark. It was wonderful, and it really helped us bring back memories of our 2014 trip.
A comment about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I've been to both places. What struck me was Hiroshima. Of course, the bomb went off center of town, and the shrine, whatever you call it, is so central to it, and it is part of the culture of the city. You go to Nagasaki, and the bomb dropped on, call it the outskirts of town, for better, and the museum was sort of like stuck in a place which was not well visited, not well seen, and I just felt that the two total different relationships to the bomb. Nagasaki, well, it happened. Don't worry about it. Let's get on. In Hiroshima, it's become part of their central part of their life. My impression.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki are very different cities, although I haven't been in Nagasaki. But Nagasaki's been always known as a foreign, that's where a lot of foreign trade was always out of Nagasaki. Hiroshima was not. Hiroshima was local trade. So they always had different, it's two cities are very different in mindset to begin with. And that might be why.
I visited the museum in Nagasaki, and I can say that it's fairly emotional to see what they did and how they treated in that museum. So I didn't get the same feeling. Yeah, Nagasaki wasn't as badly hit simply because the bomb went off in a less populated area. But I don't think they treated differently. I mean, I don't speak Japanese.
I'm sorry if I left that impression. The museum, it is very disturbing to see what's inside the museum. It just was that the museum is not the cultural center of the community, is where I felt the bomb site at Hiroshima was. It was two different parts of the way it was incorporated in the culture. One was everyday presence, and one was it was an event that happened.
Yeah, I've been to the one in here, the museum in Hiroshima twice, once in 1990 and once in 2003. In 1990, I got physically sick after leaving the museum. But 2003, the museum was totally renovated and they kind of toned down the grotesqueness of it, for lack of a better word. It's still emotional, I think, to go there, but it's not as bad as it was the first time. And it's because in the first time they showed a video that was just totally graphic and really gut-wrenching.
More people were killed in Tokyo in one night, though, than either of those cities.
Yeah.
With intentionally with the white phosphorus bombs to set the wooden buildings on fire.
Nagasaki didn't have that much damage as much as Hiroshima or Hiroshima, because Nagasaki is in a mountainous region. From what I understand, the bomb had a higher yield. The hills basically contained the blast and insulated a lot of areas. Somebody's watching the news out there.
Whoever has a TV on, please mute it. Thank you. Okay, any other comments? If not, I want to thank everybody for participation. We had 121 people, so that was the third highest attendance since we've started the Zoom meetings, Mark. So
nice.
It was a big success. So with that, I wish everyone a good night. We'll see you December 18th. My email's byc1855@aol.com. I said December 18th, and that's it. So thank you all for your participation. Mark?
Thank you.
And everyone, happy Thanksgiving and stay safe.
Happy Thanksgiving all.
Yep. Stay healthy. Stay healthy, everybody.